The topic that is next is sequences. We're going to talk about sequences. This is a lot like patterns that you've had in previous years, but now we're calling it sequences, and we're going to find expressions that allow us to find certain terms in the sequence. All right, so an arithmetic sequence is a list in which each term is found by adding the same number to the previous term. So for example, 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 2 is 7. Each term, these are called terms, is found by adding 2 to the previous term. Okay, so I want you to tell me what are the relationships between the terms here in this one. What are we adding to each one to get the next number? Okay, so that would be your pattern part from previous years. We're also going to talk about geometric sequence. And geometric sequence is when you use the same number to multiply to get from one term to the next. So for example here, when we look at it, 5 times 2 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20, 20 times 2 is 40. Each term is found by multiplying the previous term by 2. Go ahead and see if you can figure out what the relationship between these terms are. What's the pattern here in 4, 5, and 6? We can also write rules or equations to figure out how a sequence is progressing from one term to the next. And what that allows us to do is, for example, if this were a business, in year 1 we had 2 employees. In year 2 we had 5 employees. In year 3 we had 8 employees. How many employees could we possibly have in 15 years? In year 15 of my business, if I'm growing at the same rate, how many employees will I probably have? Okay, so being able to write a rule or an equation for this sequence of terms will be able to tell me or let me predict how many employees I'm going to have. So over here we have the position. Position just means where in the sequence is it. So the first number is a 2, the second number is a 5, the third number is an 8, the fourth number is 11, so on and so forth. This value of term is my actual sequence of numbers. The first thing we have to ask is what pattern do we see in this sequence? What's the pattern? Okay, so we are going to take a look at that, and we see that, okay, this was add 3, and this was add 3, and this was add 3. So obviously our pattern here is adding 3 to the previous term. Now, when we go to write our rule, we're going to use this pattern. Okay, we are going to use this pattern to create our rule. So if it's add 3 to the previous term, we're going to start by multiplying our position number times 3. Okay, so my rule is going to be 3n. Now my position number stands for n. So right now I have 3 times n for my rule because this was add 3. I'm going to multiply a positive 3 times n. Now I'm going to use that and figure out if I have to add or subtract anything from it to get a correct answer. So what I'm going to do, if the position number is n, right here I'd have 3 times 1. I'd put 1 in for n. So this would be 3 times 1, which we know is 3, not 2. We want it to be 2 though. We want the actual value to be 2. So if I have 3 times 1 is 3, I'm going to have to subtract 1 from that to get 2. Okay? So I would have to subtract 1 to get 2. For the second position, now n is worth 2. So now that's 3 times 2. So 3 times n, we'd have 3 times 2, and that's 6. Okay, the answer is 6, but I want it to be 5. So in order to get from 3 times 2 is 6 down to 5, I'm going to have to subtract 1 again. Okay, let's try one more. 3 times 3 this time. 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 minus 1 is 8, and it ends up being the value of my term. So obviously, in order to figure out what value each of these terms is, I can take the position number, multiply it times 3, and subtract 1, and find out what this is, this value of the term. So now I have a rule, and instead of having to write out 15 numbers to figure out how many employees I'll have in 15 years, I can come over here and say 3 times 15 minus 1. That's going to tell me how many employees I need in 3 years. So now I have 45 minus 1. I should have about 44 employees in my 15th year of business. Okay, So that allows you, creating these rules allows you to predict the future of certain things. And this is going to be useful to you when you get out in the world of business. And also things like planning for parties and things like that. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in depth in class. But let's take a look at some more examples. Here we go again. We've got position 1. The first number is 8, the second number is 18, the third number is 28, the fourth number is 38, the fifth number is 48. Looking at our value of terms, our pattern here obviously is adding 10. So now my rule is going to start out with a positive 10 times n, the position number. That would be here. Okay? Then I'm going to use this with my position number 1. 10 times 1 is 10. And I would have to subtract 2 to get 8. So let's try 10 times n minus 2. Let's do that for number 2 also. Never use just position 1 to create your rule. You also need to check some random other position. Let's try 3. 3 times 10 is 30. 30 minus 2 is 8. Yeah, so 10n minus 2. So my actual rule would be 10n minus 2 for this sequence. I'm going to have you do this one on your own. Now, the only thing that's changed here is that my position numbers, cross that out and write position, is across the top, and my term value is across the bottom. So here's the first number is a 3, the second number is a 5, the third number. So we're finding our pattern here. Find your pattern and write your rule. Find your rule on that one for me. Also on the next one, try those, and then when you get down to here, you're also going to try these. Now these you're going to have to mark for yourself. This is your sequence. This is the first number, this is the second number, the third number, the fourth number. So you can make your own table here to figure out what your rule is. All right, try your best on these. I know it can be kind of confusing, and we'll talk about it more in class tomorrow.